Welcome to the Advisor AI Solutions podcast, where we explore how cutting edge strategies are transforming businesses, scaling operations, and driving extraordinary growth. I'm your host, Jordan Salvador, and today we're joined by Andy Whaley, a civil engineering veteran and the driving force behind Essayons Engineers. He has led complex infrastructure projects, tackled the challenge of razor thin profit margins, and helped teams embrace smarter systems to improve efficiency and reduce risk at the same time. His work sits at the intersection of traditional engineering expertise and modern business innovation, which is a perfect fit for today's conversation. Civil engineering faces some of the toughest headways today, shrinking margins, unprecedented project delays, and need for more and fewer resources in this episode. So today we're going to be talking about how engineering firms can stay profitable, improve project efficiency, and adapt to a changing industry. But before we dive in, do you mind sharing a little bit about your journey and how Essayons Engineers came to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been a civil engineer for about 20 years. Yeah, I went to college, went to Michigan Tech University, kind of as far north of Michigan as you think you can go, and then you go a little further, and that's where Michigan Tech is. Graduated with a degree in civil engineering. From there, I commissioned into the United States Army Reserve. I spent 15 years as an Army Reserve officer, leading and soldiers doing engineering projects. I did spend all of my career with troops, so that everything from leading a platoon of 30 guys building buildings and building roads to commanding a company in Afghanistan where we built about 30 miles of road, more than a dozen bases, and a half dozen bridges or so, among a whole bunch of other things. Um, in that time, I had a civilian career that went alongside of it. So I did some land development, I did some construction management. I went and actually did some true construction where I was a project manager and a foreman for stormwater construction for a few years. And then decided that, working for other people just weren't for me. So I decided to strike out on my own and start my own company. 6 years ago, about 2 weeks ago, it was 6 year anniversary for our company. Um, and it's been nothing but growth since. So, in that innovation, one of the quick challenges I realized was just about every civil engineering project needs land surveying, and there's not enough land surveyors to go around either. So, I went and gained education, experience, knowledge, and licensure to be a professional land surveyor. So, we talk about pivoting, moving, adjusting goals as we grow a business, and that became a natural fit. And
That's
so here
cool,
we
man.
are.
Well, sounds like you have a very diverse background. As far as your military background, would you say that it had much influence in the way you started your business and the way you go about it?
Absolutely. So the first piece is the name. The name comes from my military background. Essayons means "let us try." It is the Army Engineer Regiment's motto. That motto goes all the way back to the Revolutionary War, when French engineers were helping United States, or at the time colonial patriots, uh, win the Revolutionary War. So a lot of history and heritage that goes with it. Our mindset in the Army Engineer Regiment and in Essayons Engineering is to let us try and never give up. So, as you can see kind of behind me, I got a little sign that says everything is figure outable. Well, here at Essayons, we figure stuff out. And we're always trying new things, and doing some unconventional things, and using technology in new ways and in challenging ways. But yeah, that all stems to my military career when, honestly, when we were building stuff in Afghanistan, we didn't have first world materials all the time. There were some times where we had to make stuff happen with what we had, and we got pretty good at it. So I take that to the engineering point where, it's a small company. We do a lot of different things. I like to say, we're kind of the master or a jack of all trades. We try to be a master of a few. but it is tough to be master of everything. So,
That's super cool. Yeah, I'm sure in Afghanistan you must have really had to wear your motto on your chest and figure things out.
oh, there was no doubt about that.
That's terrific. And you also mentioned that you're also a land surveyor now, or land surveyor as well now.
That's correct.
How impactful has that been?
That has been huge. That has been absolutely huge. I've always I started my career doing land development, had some adjacent projects to land surveying. I did some field work when I worked um, in the land development field. When I was an Army engineer, we did a bunch of surveying. I did supervise a team of engineers and surveyors. That's what they did. Uh, and then, when I started my company, it was hard to find surveyors to do work in a timely, good fashion. There's a lot of big companies out there. Being a super small company, I really didn't want to work with big companies. I didn't want them working for me. I don't mind working for them, but it's when you start subcontracting to you know um, the ENR 50 companies, you're like, all right, really, like who's prior? Am I a priority? What are you guys going to do? You guys going to charge a lot of money? Like my clients, they like the value proposition. So being able to pivot that and provide services where we're doing some of our projects, we're starting with survey, we're doing the design, we're doing the stakeout, we're doing the construction management, and we're doing the as-built. So we're providing our clients on some of these smaller projects. We're not talking about multi-million-dollar projects. For them, it's a couple $100,000 project. We're providing all the engineering services in-house to support them. And some of those services that we don't provide, we go ahead and subcontract those out. That way they show up with they got one company to take care of everything from cradle to grave of their project. So um, that has been absolutely huge to that piece. In terms of growth, it has grown our company massively. We've grown kind of 50% year over year in terms of revenue. Right now, 50% of our revenue is from land surveying. So, and it's honestly, I think it's going to grow. I think the percentage of surveying is going to grow, and the percentage of engineering is going to decrease. And I'm okay with that.
Oh, that's interesting. How something that you identified an opportunity in this industry, you've decided to fill that gap, and now it's potentially going to be taking over.
Yeah, sure is.
That's awesome. All right, so just to kind of slide to our topic today, so margins in civil engineering have always been tight, but lately it seems for a lot firms are being squeezed even harder. Where do you think most companies go wrong when trying to stay profitable?
Yeah, well, I'll say kind of a couple things, right? And just from my own experience of looking at projects that I've done, very profitable in some of the projects that definitely had to eat a lot of profit on. In fact, some of the projects took a loss on. Biggest piece in civil engineering is regulatory review. And the reality is, more than half of our job as civil engineers is to get our clients regulatory approval on a number of aspects. Really depends on what state we're in. Here in Maryland, there's a lot of regulations in grading and land disturbance, stormwater management and discharge, road access, and general zoning and land development. And those are all aspects that are highly variable, not only to the state, but to the local municipality or jurisdiction you're in. As I have been challenged in I've always tried to push the limits. As civil engineering is a local business. These engineering companies, these large ENR 50 engineer companies that work all over the country. The reality is, it's local engineers doing local work, and when they're not doing local work, that's when things go awry. There are some things that are pretty standard throughout the country. I mean, If you're gonna build a bridge, you're gonna follow a certain code. That's typically a national code. Everybody understands it. Structural engineers can work throughout the country. We start talking about stormwater management. Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, California, Washington, New York, Michigan, Texas, all do it differently. So when we say, hey, water goes downhill and this is how it works, well, there's a handful of methodologies of how we treat pollutants and quantity in stormwater management that differs from jurisdiction to jurisdiction and from state to state. So that's number one. I have been burned in a number of jurisdictions that I have decided that it's not worth it to go work in those jurisdictions. So when clients call me and say, hey, I want to work in such and such county, I tell them, here's a company that does great work and it's not me, call them. And I know that they work almost solely in that jurisdiction. And I'm happy to give them the business because I don't want to deal with it. I think the second piece that goes in that regulatory piece is those are always changing and updating. And so a lot of times, when you work your estimate, you go, all right, this is what I expect will happen. Well, there are a bunch of unknowns that occur from when you start the project to when you actually get underway. Some of it is actual new regulations. Some of it is new interpretations of existing regulations, where I've run into that, where all of a sudden you have a regulatory reviewer that goes, well, I think we interpret it this way. And you're like, listen, we've been doing this for 10 years. Why are we changing our minds, right? And there's unpublished guidance that comes down, and there's conversations that happen. Sometimes there's change of personnel, some new interpretations occur. And that typically throws a project for a loophole. So, and then I guess the last piece is talent pool. Talent's hard to find. So, it's hard to find. It's hard to train. My experience is that specifically in engineering, and I would say in many other professions, college teaches you about this much when you really need to know this much. And so the ability for a brand new engineer to come out of school and being willing to learn all that there is to learn about the profession, even though they've just spent 4 years learning all the theory, showing up and saying, all right, how do I actually apply these calculations that I learned in all these classes? Because really the reality is that's what we learn as engineers. We learn calculations. When you get into the real world, that's how you learn to apply them. And that tends to be a big challenge, because so many people come out and go, you know what? I already know stuff. I don't need to learn. And you're like, listen, I was one of those. I said, listen, I got a college degree. I'm an Army officer. What do I need to learn? What can I be taught? Right. And then I was humbled very quickly, because my mentor in land development was a guy that had no college education, who had been doing it for 40 years. And while there were things that I could do that he couldn't do, he could run circles around me in stormwater management design, because he'd been doing it. He'd seen it from when it was, doing it on slide rules and cheater tables. So he's followed it along. Even though he didn't have an education in it, he knew how to do it. So, yeah, that was a very humbling experience. And now I look back and go, all right, you know what? There's a lot to learn. And just because you went to college doesn't mean you actually know everything. So,
Okay, so just to unpack that, so the biggest hurdles or challenges, it's codes and regulations, be it irregular and not uniform across, from state to state in a lot of cases. And then,
yep, just about every case, especially in civil engineering.
Right.
Yep.
And then not being able to find good talent.
Yeah.
Right. So if you were a up and coming engineer, individual or a firm, what kind of advice would you give them to, mitigate these risks?
Yeah. So, well, from the regulatory piece, one thing that I really try to practice, I'm not very good at it, so I have to work really hard to do it, is to engage regulators early and have discussions with them. Now, some of them don't like to do that. So it does become challenging when you're like, hey, I'd like to talk about this project. Hey, just submit it. You're like, okay, I'll just submit it, right? Some of them are happy to engage and say, hey, I'm thinking about this project. This is what we want to do. What do you think? And many times they'll tell you exactly what they think, which is good. It gets you early. There are some jurisdictions. I'll give a shout out to Baltimore City. I've done some work down in Baltimore City. They basically require you to meet in person before you submit, because they want to tell you where the pitfalls are. Hey, this is what's going to happen, and this is what we expect you to put on the plans. And that way there aren't any major surprises. If you show up with a site plan that's kind of off the wall, and they're like, listen, this isn't going to work, so let's not waste everybody's time. Here's what you need to do to make it work. And many of us engineers don't like that. We don't like being told how to design our projects. I'm one of them. I go, listen, what do you do? Right? I've been doing this for 20 years. Right? Well, many of those planners, many of those reviewers, they've been doing it for just as long, sometimes longer. So engaging reviewers early, and that can be a challenge jurisdiction to jurisdiction. The other piece is when you get a set of comments back, ask a lot of questions. And I will say some of the reviewers, once again, are excellent. Hey, what do you mean by this? Hey, what if I do this? Hey, what about this? And they're very, very engaged. And typically they'll let you kind of skirt the line if you're on the line, if you're asking questions like that. The third piece is address their comments, right? That's a big piece. One of the common pitfalls, and I've run into this a few times, is you get to the end of the project and they go, oh, wait, you also need this approval. You're like, all right, why are we just finding out about this? Right? So having those conversations, hey, is there anything else that we're going to need? Do you require any other approvals? Do you require sign off by anybody else? Because so much of the process, it doesn't get to the end until it's like, oh, you need to check all these boxes. And you're like, well, where does that say that we have to check all these boxes? And it's buried in some local code that says that you got to have the King of England sign off on whatever project. And you're like, all right. So, now you just set a project back 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, because you didn't see that coming. And sometimes you should have, and sometimes it just kind of hits you, right? So yeah. From the talent piece, listen, I'm still trying to solve that. So when I've got that figured out, I'll let you know. From an up and coming engineer, learn as much as you can. I mean, never turn an assignment down. Never say this isn't my job. Whatever assignment is, if it's making copies for the president, if it's surveying, if it's going and being a rod man. I mean, I just hired a new surveyor. I've been doing it now for a few years, mostly by myself. Today, I was the rodman. I was bottom of the food chain today, even though I'm the owner of the company, because he needs to get familiar with the equipment, with our way of doing things. And I'm paying him to be the surveyor. So, my job is to stand there and hold the rod and do what he says to do, while I assess him and help him in our equipment and that sort of stuff. But, this guy's been surveying for 20-something years. I don't need to tell him how to do the job. I might need to tell him how to use the software that we use, but that's not it.
Right. No, it sounds like a big takeaway from that is, being able to plan ahead, communicate and ask a ton of questions, and then to be able to utilize it, right? Be able to actually do what's asked of you, and to be able to implement it to reduce these massive delays.
Yep.
And
one
and
last thing I would
costs.
say is, one last thing you say on that is, you screw one project, don't make that same mistake on the next one.
And it sounds like you've been burned a few times, so your wisdom here is very, very much appreciated.
Yeah. Well,
Okay,
we've all been burned, right? Just the question is how bad.
right. So Andy, everyone talks about efficiency, but few execute it well. Where have you seen technology, perhaps AI, automation, or better project data, perhaps, actually move the needle on delivery speed and cost control?
Yeah. So I think the biggest piece, and we struggle with it. We struggle with it. Biggest piece of efficiency is data management. I think that's where we lose the vast majority of our efficiency. Um, in doing small projects and big projects, and I'm talking small projects, on the order of a $10,000 fee for full service, right? Versus a big project where we are finishing up doing uh, stormwater as-built. We're still working on them. We're doing stormwater as-built for 120 facilities that span 7 miles of expressway. That I think all said and done was like a $400 million project, right? So we have a small piece of that. I mean, we're talking our fee is about $125,000, but the amount of data that goes with that is massive. So we're spanning everything from, you know, one essentially, if we go one BMP to 150 BMPs, then we're spanning that whole piece, right? And so, when we're always working these small projects, we get lazy in data management because you don't lose a lot of time or money in being disorganized in a small project. In fact, you probably save a little money not treating a small project like a giant project where you go through all of these controls and you go through all these steps and you go through this massive organization. You got all these file folders in this massive database, right? To do 7 entries in a database, right? You're like, all right, probably not worth it, right? But then you work a bunch of small projects and you say, oh, we got this. And then we take a big project and we kind of get lost, right? Because we didn't. And what happens is we didn't set it up right at the beginning. And so now you're playing catch up. And so I've seen this in other companies where having what I like to say, having a multi-tiered data procedure where you don't spend a lot of time managing data for small projects. And if you know they're going to stay a small project, then you keep them a small project and you keep them simple, and that's easy, right? But if you know it's going to be a big project, you got to set it up early. You got to set it up organized early. And that goes with CAD files, that goes with survey information, that, I mean, to the point of, doing our stakeout, right? You go, it's not that big of a project. Well, we got some projects that, I mean, we're pushing 500, 600 points that we've been staking out. Excuse me. That gets pretty cumbersome pretty fast. When you're starting to manage all the data that goes with a stakeout point, right? That's more than just that's a stake in the ground. There's a lot that goes behind it. There's an offset, and there's a proposed elevation, and there's a station, and there's all these different data points that go with it. So how do you keep that all organized? And oh, by the way, the client's going to call you about 3 weeks after you put that stake in and go, hey, what about this point? I'm confused. Can you help me out with this? And so now you got to go in and find it, right? And find out what they're talking about, figure out what you did 3 weeks ago. So that sort of piece, right? So data management's a huge, huge piece. What can AI do in that? Man, I'm still trying to figure that one out in terms of data management. We use some tools to help us. I will make a plug for data management. We use Airtable. We have a project management database built in Airtable. The great thing about it is it started as a spreadsheet. List of projects, list of clients. I think now we're up to 25 tables. It's all interlinked. It links into our file system so we can click in and track our files down. I can track workload, so I can assign tasks to to employees and say, here's what you need to do. They can get a PDF or a printout, so my surveyor can take it out to the field and go, oh, I know exactly what I need to do. Project number, here's what's going on. He's got a tablet. He can pull all the files up while he's out in the field. So that's very, very helpful in that piece. Where we struggle big time is in the CAD side, because there's a whole lot of data that goes into CAD that you don't really even think about. In it's certainly easier when you're one person, but when you start to add team members and now you're working on the same project together, think of CAD as a CAD file as maybe a 2,000 page document, right? And everybody's working on a page. You're like, all right, well, how do we break this out? Right? Do we break it out by topic? Do we break it out by paragraph? Is everybody working in the same file? And so now one person saves and it gets overwritten, right? So there are different methods to do that. AutoCAD provides some pretty good tools, but the tools are just that. They're just tools. You still got to know how to use them. You got to think about how we're going to organize it. And that's one of those cases where I actually do enforce to my guys to my folks, that we're going to treat every project the same, whether it's a simple project or a complex project. It's expandable. So we're going to start with this. And if we need, we're going to start with one file, but we're going to set up one file so that when we go to two, it's easy. It's easy to break out. When we need to go to three, we're easy to break out. We figure out when we need to break those files up, what it looks like. Is it by function? Is it by area? Is it by discipline? Is it by sheet set, right? Is it a stormwater drawing versus a piece? And so it does become a challenge when you got multiple people and you're like, hey, listen, it's, this is the way we're going to work. And it's like, well, that's a lot of work for this one sheet. You're like, yeah, but this project is likely to expand. And oh, by the way, if we get into bad habits, when we get to the big project, then mayhem ensues. And that's when we spend a lot of time and a lot of money figuring out what's been done and what hasn't been done, digging through files, and reorganizing. that becomes a big challenge. And I have seen that in other companies where we struggle. We struggle with that because, the reality is everybody thinks a different way. Everybody organizes things a different way. And I'll give most employees the benefit of the doubt that they're trying to do what they think is best. But that's, it's kind of like thinking like a basketball team. Everybody thinks they're running the right play, but the reality is nobody's working together. And so we gotta bring everything together. That way everybody knows what their assignment is, where they're supposed to be on the court, and what they're doing when they don't have the ball, right? So
Right. Yeah. So so that sounds like, as far as the data points you're talking about and being able to maintain records, it all starts from having a foundation of uniform. Whether whether it's a small project or a complicated project, you still have to have the same strong foundation where you can build off of. Having those data points allows you to be able to scale it up in whichever direction it needs to as well,
yep.
while maintaining communication with your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that takes a little bit of planning and some figuring out and some mistakes. Right? Figuring out what not to do when you run into challenges. And, like you said, you're working on a big document and you realize, you got two folks working in the same file and then one overwrites the other one. You're like, oh my goodness, all right, hold on. Let's stop here. We got to fix this. And I've had that on a CAD file where we had two people working in the same CAD file, one overwrote the other one. And, it was about 30 minutes of work lost.
Yeah, I can only imagine those small errors early on can, exponentially magnify as it
Yeah,
progresses, especially
and
when it comes to to size and scale.
yeah, absolutely,
Okay, so
absolutely.
Andy, looking ahead, say 5 to 10 years, what trends or disruptions, especially perhaps around AI or automations, do you think will redefine how civil engineering firms operate?
Um, yeah, so certainly trends. There is never going to be less regulation. So regulations are going to get more. Um, in the just the way the United States was founded and built, um, you know, it's the reality is that we're going to stay where every state's a little different. I do not foresee anytime in the near future where we have something like an international building code for land development for civil engineers. I just don't see it, right? Every region has different priorities. One specifically when we talk about water, right? Water is the driver of what we do in land development and civil engineering. There are different aspects, right? There's the highway guys, right? But the highway guys, they're not just figuring out how to make roads. They're also figuring out how to make safe roads. And it rains. So where does the water go, right? Every state has different priorities for what that is. And I'll give you a great example, right? If you look at the Chesapeake Bay region, the Chesapeake Bay region is all its focus is about removing pollutants. The Chesapeake Bay is improving in health. It's great news. It's taken a lot of effort to do it, but it's all about removing pollutants because it's the pollutants that kill the fish, kill the submerged aquatic vegetation, kill the crabs. Crabs are super important in Maryland, so we can't have that, right? So that's key. Now, if we go up to like out west in the Mountain West, in Colorado and New Mexico and Wyoming and Montana, parts of California, Nevada, like they're not worried about pollution. They're worried about who gets the water downstream. So, there are jurisdictions and there are areas in the Mountain West that you don't, as the property owner, you don't own the rain that falls on your property. Somebody downstream does. And so you are not legally allowed to capture it on your property without certain approvals. So that's not going to change, right? We're going to continue to have that different regional aspect of what's important. The other piece is different pollutants are important, right? The Great Lakes have different pollutants that are important than the Chesapeake Bay. So the trend is still going to be it's going to be disjointed, it's going to be irregular, and it's going to be state and location based. So civil engineering is going to stay local. Disruptors, you know, if if AI, and I'm sure it's not far, I'm sure Autodesk and Bentley are working on it, can draw plans, then I think that's going to be a huge disruptor. Um, Now, I don't think that AI, and I might be eating my words here in 20 years, but I don't think AI is going to replace professional development. And I'm confident in that because we're seeing it right now. AI does not have any ethics. It feeds what it feeds, right? Um, we see reports about Chat GPT giving false information about telling people the wrong things, right? About doing things what could be saying things that could be immoral. So I don't think we're going to take the human out of the loop. But as an engineer, I spend a lot of time and I spend a lot of money taking a design and translating it into a set of plans. And a lot of times we do them together, right? Where we're doing the design in CAD, and then we're using CAD, or architects use Revit to build a model, and then that system translates into plans. Um, right now, that gives you about 50 to 60% of the solution. The last 40 to 50% is done by a human. Labeling, moving labels, fixing line types, putting in notes, putting in information, that sort of stuff is all stuff done by a human that may or may not need to, right? Like, we look at AI, image generation, we look at like, they could easily take a set of plans and produce, I would say, 85 to 90% of the non-site specific design information, general notes, labels, uh, vicinity maps, like produce what's on the sheet in a matter of seconds, where that takes hours for a human to do. So I think that's a huge disruptor. Now, does that impact an engineer? I don't think it will impact an engineer, but it will impact a CAD technician, which works with engineers. So, there's kind of like that's kind of a piece that, there's a lot of kids going to school to be CAD techs, that, they're going to need to be engineers if they want to continue on a career. Because I think that CAD tech piece is slowly going away, and I think AI is going to do some replacement of that. And we've seen it. The last big disruption was going from hand drafting to CAD, right? And then to BIM, right? So now, 20 years ago when I started, civil engineers were just starting to do three-dimensional modeling, right? And it was a huge disruptor for us young guys that were coming into the business going, oh yeah, no problem. We can build, we use Civil 3D. We can build an entire pipe network in 3 dimensions. And so we spend the time building the model so that when you produce the plan, the profile, the section, and the tables that go with it, guess what? All the information changes when you change one thing, right? And that's important, because that's probably the biggest issue in construction, is when us engineers put a set of plans together and there's differing information on 2 different pages when they should match, right? And that's a piece that costs the construction guys. Sometimes it costs the engineers, because they go, hey, you cost us money, you're going to pay, right? Now we got to go to insurance, and so that's a huge piece. The other piece in the surveying side that we're already starting to see it is document, basically boundary documents to CAD. So we have there's a piece of software out there right now. I can load a deed into the software. It reads the deed, finds the description, and draws it in CAD. It takes 15 minutes. Cost me a couple $100 a year to do it in 15 minutes. I paid for that software on my first deed. Like that's how much time it saves to do that. So it's absolutely amazing. We got another set of software. Surveyors spend a lot of time doing research. That's probably the biggest differentiator between a professional land surveyor and a field surveyor or rodman is, we're licensed to determine the record boundary. So we spent a lot of time going through records. Well, in Maryland, the records are digitized back to the 1600s, but they're only searchable to about 1970. So if I got to go past 1970, and I got to go through images of indices. So I got to go through a table of somebody who hand wrote Jim Jones to Jane Jones, book 53, page 72. Okay. So if I'm looking for Jones, I need to go through page after page after page looking for it. Well, I can take that page now. I can load it onto a piece of software. It can produce an Excel spreadsheet for me. It takes about 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's incredible,
right?
how much time is going to be saved and
Yeah,
can be already.
The other day I was doing a boundary I lost the title. I lost the chain of title at about 1990 or so. I searched all the way back to 1930. It took me 3 hours. I mean, it was 120 pages of indices that I searched in 3 hours. There's no way I was going to do that with my
That's
eyes.
incredible.
No way, you know. And I still haven't found what I need. I still need to go back. I probably need to go back until about 1910. So um, just to figure out where that chain of title went. But yeah, that was a challenge. But that's where AI is coming in, like interpreting information and translating it to another format. I think that is a huge use of our time. I know many surveyors who are using it. It does a great job, but once again, it doesn't take the human out, because we still have to figure out, we take that deed. Well, that deed might not match another deed, and there might be overlaps, or there might be gaps in the data, in the deeds, right? That we have to figure out and interpret who's got senior title and who's got junior title. And so it's not cut and dry, especially in the colonial states. It is not cut and dry. It is a huge challenge. So that's not going away in the surveying part. In civil
Right.
engineering, there's still engineering judgment. That's not going to go away. And I don't think AI will ever take that over. Certainly the professions are going to make sure that AI can't take that over. We're going to work hard to make sure that, like, hey, engineers still need to be licensed. And if you're going to build a building and you're going to discharge water, there needs to be a human that has agreed to a certain set of ethics that we know has a certain education, certain experience, that's going to sign off on that. I don't think that's going away.
Right, right. No, that's super cool. To get your insights, it's definitely to our show. It's a fresh perspective from not just a civil engineer perspective, but also from a land surveyor insight as well. So thank you for sharing that. Um, Eddie, as far as growing as a company with the Essayons Engineers, what's the biggest bottleneck you guys are facing right now? And what might be a misconception you guys are hearing about solving it?
Yeah. So our biggest bottleneck is cash flow. And every business owner that I've talked to, that tends to be one of the biggest pieces. So having enough cash on hand to pay our bills, pay our people, and then get paid for what we're working on, right? Because the vast majority of our business is we do the work and then we get paid. Uh,
Right.
every once in a while, we'll take a client and say, hey, you need to pay us ahead of time. Some of our clients, surprisingly, I don't understand why, but want to pay us ahead of time. I'm like, okay, you want to pay me beforehand? I'll take your money. That will help. But yeah, getting paid in the time and manner is really the biggest bottleneck. And that's coming in lots of ebbs and flows. It just so happens that one of the things that we do a lot of the work occurs through the whole project. Guess when we get paid? At the very end. So we're putting out effort and resources for months before we see anything. And so that does become a challenge, right? How do we solve that, right? We got to borrow money. I'm not independently rich. If I was, I probably wouldn't be running my own